Hey everybody, so it's just about 1 after 1, and I am going to go ahead and get things started here. This is the Pathways to Employment webinar series. We have been covering all different types of subjects since about December of 2020, and we've gone to so many different places within workforce and all the different industries that Geographic Solutions touches. So we have covered things in previous episodes like the gig economy, trends in disability employment, apprenticeships, youth engagement, virtual service delivery, and so on and so forth. The point of this series and what we hope that you'll take away is something new or a best practice. We hope that you'll answer a burning question, be able to take some information from one of these sessions and take it to an employee in your department or a colleague or to your higher up and say, hey, this is what I learned and I just wanted to share it with you. This is a little bit of information about Geographic Solutions and some housekeeping before we get into today's session. If you have a question, please go ahead and submit it in the question pane in the floating GoToWebinar toolbar. We will answer all questions at the end of the discussion. And now I'd like to invite our panelists to come on and to share their cameras and to give a little bit of an introduction. So starting with Eric. Eric, thank you so much for being here today. Eric, please go ahead and share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me, Evan. So I actually am an architect by trade, but 10 years ago, I started a nonprofit in my hometown of Augusta, Georgia, to try to help entrepreneurs get started and have some sort of support and community. And over the last few years, I've turned that into an effort called Make Startups, where I'm helping communities across the country better understand how they can support entrepreneurs with the workforce development system.
Thank you, Eric. And to Teresa. Teresa, please go ahead and introduce yourself and just say a little bit about your work with Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. Hey, everyone. My name is Teresa Rooney Myers, and I am the Director of Impact at Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute. I've been working in nonprofit and community development spaces for the past decade, and I come from an entrepreneurial background myself, dating back to my great-grandparents who emigrated from Sicily to start a food cart and ultimately a grocery business in Chicago. Most recently, I worked in workforce development. So I spent 6 years working for an organization in Washington, D.C. that trained high barrier job seekers for careers in the culinary industry. And so was really deeply connected to workforce systems, both locally and regionally. 3 years ago, I transitioned from workforce to entrepreneurship as another rung on the economic mobility ladder. And now for the past 3 years, I've been at Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute, which supports Coloradans who are ready for business ownership and come from a variety of high barrier backgrounds. We offer education, so we're a technical assistance provider, helping folks with some of the business fundamentals and foundations. We offer mentorship, as well as capital that uses a variety of character-based and relationship-based metrics beyond some of the more traditional financial metrics to offer capital as low as $500 and as high as $75,000 for new and growing businesses in Colorado. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Teresa. And to Latanya. Latanya, thank you for joining us today as well. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and just say a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much, Evan. And I want to say I am so honored to be here today with our other panelists. I did not realize that we were all nonprofits, so that is a great place to be. Well, I am Latanya Goodwin. I am from Georgia as well. I'm a long friend of Eric, but a new friend of Teresa, and again, excited to be on this panel. I came into workforce as serving as a board chair for our local workforce board. Just love this opportunity so much that when I had an opportunity to retire, I joined WorkSource East Central Georgia as their director. We are 9 counties East Central Georgia, primarily rural. We do have one of the best communities to live in the nation. I believe that we were granted a couple of years ago, and that is Columbia, Georgia, and that's more suburban, but mostly we are rural. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Latanya. So Eric, I'd like to start with a couple of questions for you. And I know in talking about entrepreneurship, one thing I wanted to kind of throw out to the crowd before we get started is what kind of skills do you need to become an entrepreneur? Go ahead and take out your phone and go to the camera app and point it at the screen, and a little QR code thingy should come up. And I know that's not really the right term for it, but I guess that's just what I call it. And go ahead and enter a word into the Slido app that describes what kind of skills you think you would need to become an entrepreneur. And you can also join at slido.com. So even if you don't want to use your phone, you can go to the website and enter that code right there. So Eric and Latanya and Teresa, while some folks are putting some answers in here, what kind of skills do you see on a regular basis that you kind of know when you start talking with somebody that they are going to become an entrepreneur, or that you think they will choose that career path?
So I'll say right now, I'm loving that what I see on the screen is determined, because that determination is probably one of the most critical aspects to their success. But I try to break it down into really two primary categories. One is, can you identify what an opportunity actually is in a marketplace? And then are you able to see what the risks are around it?
And Teresa, to you, just as some folks are still putting in their answers here, in your opinion or in your experience, what kind of skills does somebody need to become an entrepreneur? What do you see when you see somebody who has these skills? Do you think to yourself, that person or should be an entrepreneur or could be very entrepreneurial?
Sure, I'll certainly echo what Eric shared and add one more around resiliency. Entrepreneurship is a tough field. It's a long-term journey, and there are clearly, as we've experienced over the last 2.5, 3 years, ups and downs and ebbs and flows of that journey. So really finding folks who are resilient is a key entrepreneurial quality.
Thank you. I love that. And I agree about resiliency. I think that's really important for entrepreneurism and even really just like in daily life and in a job. So Latanya, just, going on, echoing Eric and Teresa and the question that I just asked them, what kind of skills do you think you need to become an entrepreneur? And what have you seen in a person that has really made you think, that person might become an entrepreneur, or it maybe is very entrepreneurial?
Thanks, Evan. I tell you, one that popped up earlier on the screen was innovative, and it keeps moving, but I definitely think innovation and lining that with our workforce innovation and opportunity is another. A entrepreneur sees the opportunity that exists by solving a problem, filling a gap that is there in society, of being talented. I see another one that I really like is hustle. That is the street term, is hustling. And truly that fits into the resiliency and the determination to become successful. That grit and leaders, I think all of these are absolutely the characteristics of becoming an entrepreneur, having these great skill sets.
Thank you all. So now I'd like to jump into some questions and also jump out of a slide, I guess. So I'm going to go back into that slide. And Eric, as we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks and getting prepared for this event, one thing I came across that I really liked, or that I thought was just super interesting, is that half of all new ventures are created in 20 counties across the United States. So I thought to myself, one question I wanted to ask you is, how can entrepreneurship, how can that help in smaller areas, and how can we support the metro areas that maybe aren't part of those 20 counties that are responsible for all of these new ventures?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought this one up, because to me, this is really one of the underlying secrets to understand where we are in America right now. If you dig into this statistic a little bit closer, what you actually see is that Miami, New York City, Dallas, and San Francisco actually account for over half of those counties that are listed there. And one of the things that first drove me into this field was I looked at a county by county map of the U.S. Based on income, and what you see is these places where entrepreneurship is a focus are where the higher median household incomes are in our communities. You can also look at statistics, and it shows that half of all, or not half, sorry, my apologies, all net new job creation in America is created by companies that are less than 5 years old. And so when you see all of the communities that we have, sort of struggling to figure out how do we retain people in our community, how do we have opportunity, the answer actually is entrepreneurship. There's no other thing that we can do to really propel our communities. Everything else that we do from an economic development standpoint is just pit your community against my community to see if we can recruit whatever manufacturing plant or distribution center is there. And we're basically just fighting over the same piece of pie. So the only way to grow the pie is to support entrepreneurship. And honestly, what I've seen throughout the work that we do is that we make a tremendous impact in Augusta, Georgia alone. Since I started doing this work, we've helped create 1,500 jobs in our community through just supporting entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Eric. And when choosing a career pathway, why choose entrepreneurship or creating a new business over finding a company at a job or just within the workforce?
Yeah, there's a few reasons, and one of the things I'll sort of start with is that if you just think about America itself, like we're a land of pioneers, right? We all just sort of like this country was settled by people who thought, I'm going to take a chance, I'm going to go do a thing. And then, so that's sort of looking at the macro scale of our culture. But then if I look at myself individually, I consider myself an entrepreneurship. And some people talk about entrepreneurs as being people who are driven either by opportunity or by necessity. And I think of it as actually kind of both, because the truth is, I was an absolutely horrible employee. I was the kind of person who, whenever I was there, I just thought, I know how to do this better than they do. Why am I listening to so-and-so? And I just always wanted to chart my own path. And I think that that's a really common trait within entrepreneurs, is there are people who are trying to do that. But then you also look at people who have different life circumstances. So, imagine somebody who maybe they're a caregiver for somebody, and so they can't work a normal 9-to-5 schedule. Maybe it's somebody who's getting out of prison and, they keep running into barriers when they're trying to get a job. There's all sorts of opportunity spaces where, a job isn't necessarily the right answer because you can't quite fit into the system as we have it now. And so entrepreneurship provides this alternate path that actually not only creates a job for yourself, but on average creates 5 additional jobs in a community every time we support somebody to start a business.
Thank you, Eric. And I know, I think about the financial impact that it takes to for somebody to start a business. And how can somebody, a person who is aspiring to be an entrepreneur, calculate the financial cost that it would take to start a new business? What are some of your favorite resources that are out there, and what are some of the things that folks can do in order to kind of take into account all those different financial aspects that might affect them on their path to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's that's a really big one, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm excited that we have Teresa on this call as well, because I think one of the things that Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute does so well is they help address the microfinance gap. So one of the things that we've realized is that so many of our entrepreneurs, they need really less than $10,000 to get their business off the ground. We're talking about how to build out initial inventory and things of that nature. Can they have enough capital so that they can have a website that's up and running and be able to, have a custom email account. So instead of just having, their name at Gmail or their business name at Gmail, they can actually get, mybusinessname.com. And so it allows them to present themselves much more professionally. One of the things that we do as an organization at Make Startups is every Tuesday, we offer a free workshop to anyone in the country. So what we do in that is we help them to really look at their business. And first off, we're trying to get them to understand, are they pursuing something just because they think like that's a good idea, maybe it solved a problem for themselves, or have they started to look at what's the actual opportunity in a marketplace, so that, are there customers out there that would want that, and beginning to address what market demand looks like. But then we also run them through a financial calculator that we've built. And so that allows them, what we do is we first look at their personal finances, and so really run through everything and their household budget. And then we go through what are your startup costs for your business, what does it cost to get your inventory? If you're an inventory-based business, what's your cost of sales? Like what does your profit around each one of those things look like? And then we help them develop an actual financial runway calculator so that they can look and see, okay, how many sales a month do I have to make so that I can support myself? What's the threshold at which I can start really getting paid as opposed to just breaking even on this thing? And then, how long can I survive in business? And so anyone can go on the Make Startups website, and then there's a button to click for a free workshop and sign up for that.
Eric, thank you. And, leading out of that question into my next question, with the Startup Act, how would this help new entrepreneurs? And at the same time, would it also help seasoned entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah. Okay. So the Startup Act is something that we're really proud of. So we, I told you it was about 3 years ago when we started trying to implement workforce development programs, and Latonya was our first partner that really believed in this concept, and she helped our organization actually get approved by the Georgia Non-Public Post-Secondary Education Commission, so that we could be qualified in some way to be on the eligible training provider list, and then helped us actually get the program on Georgia's eligible training provider list. Since that time, we've been able to get the program approved, not only in Georgia with Teresa there in Colorado, also North Carolina and South Carolina. But what we've consistently run into are a few key barriers. So one is not every state incorporates entrepreneurship in their state workforce plan. And so really, I think that the first and most important thing that the Startup Act does is it incorporates entrepreneurship as one of the functions of state workforce boards, so that hopefully all the boards will begin thinking about how is my state going to support entrepreneurship. But then what it also does is so all the steps that we had to take so that we could become eligible, it sort of streamlines that whole process. It basically says that entrepreneurial skills programs would be eligible for using those program dollars. It also incorporates entrepreneurship within the career services portion of WIOA. And then I think the really critical part, and this is where we've encountered lots of barriers at local levels. I think everybody here probably understands what are all the performance measure requirements around doing workforce programs. And there's usually a lot of hesitation about going into an entrepreneurship program because everyone thinks, how am I going to meet my employment and my wage requirements? Now, I can certainly make an argument to you that if you look at something like the Kauffman indicators of entrepreneurship, it will show that 80% of businesses will survive the first year, and on average, they'll create 5 jobs in your community. So there's actually a fairly high degree of likelihood to meet those numbers. But the Startup Act would create a 3-year basically pilot and research period for the Department of Labor to develop and test new performance measures all around the country. So it would really give us a 3-year window to pilot all sorts of approaches to supporting entrepreneurs in America and seeing what works the best so that we can have new performance measures moving forward.
Thank you, Eric. And I did want to just bring up that, again, in talking about during the session, you had mentioned that there is a workforce opportunity calculator, and I wanted to throw this out to the audience and just let you know that if you go to this website or if you scan this QR code, you will be able to go and see the impact of entrepreneurship in your area. And Eric, can you explain this just a little bit better than I can about what what folks will encounter if they go to this?
Yeah, so first off, what I will tell you is this calculator organization, we actually run multiple workforce programs. One's also a code boot camp, and this calculator was built by someone who graduated our program, our code boot camp program. And so what it does is it takes 3 different data sets. One is Kauffman's indicators of entrepreneurship. And so what that looks at is what are your entrepreneurship rates in your community, your entrepreneur survivability in your community, and the job creation rate. Then it looks at the Census Bureau to see what is the current poverty rate that you have in your county, as well as BLS data on your entrepreneurship rates. And what it does is it combines all of those to calculate this is how many entrepreneurs are in your community that are facing poverty. It then it'll look at that and say what is the actual cost of supporting and investing in all those entrepreneurs, and what would be the economic impact of doing so. So as an example, I'm on the website right now, so I'll just talk about the county where we operate, which is in Georgia, and then it is Richmond County. And if I hit submit there, what I see is that there are 190 disadvantaged entrepreneurs in Richmond County. 145 of them should survive the first year if we provide them with adequate support. That would create 780 jobs in our community and create almost a $20 million economic impact on just over a $1 million investment. Oh, and what I will say, just to sort of qualify all this out, I think that our economic impact number is pretty conservative, because we just looked at this and said every job created is a $25,000 economic impact. And I think what we all know is that one, that's pretty low from a wage perspective. People will probably be making more than that. And this does not take into account indirect and induced economic impact from the business as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. And now I would like to move into our portion where we have a few questions for Teresa. And Teresa, once again, thank you so much for being here today. And I really appreciate your time with helping me set this up and just, you know, meeting over the last couple of weeks. And so the first question that I wanted to ask is, you know, based on your experience and your insight, how can we level the playing field for entrepreneurship as a career pathway?
Yeah, thanks for that, Evan. You know, I feel like I'm really building on a lot of what Eric shared around the potential and the opportunity of entrepreneurship, really to increase economic inclusion when something like background or education or household needs might create barriers to that financial stability. So one stat that I'd like to share is that the median net worth of business owners is 2.5 times higher than non-business owners. The median net worth 2.5 times higher for business owners versus non-business owners. And when you dive into that data and when you disaggregate it by race and ethnicity, we see that for Black business owners and for Hispanic, Latinx business owners, the median net worth is 10 times higher. And so there's just a huge potential here to address some of the inequities in our system through entrepreneurship. However, we know that the playing field isn't even. Getting to the field might not be accessible for everyone. Not everyone knows how to play the game, and the rules aren't fair. And so we really need to create an ecosystem of inclusivity. And so ultimately, it takes money and it takes support to start your own business. You know, Eric just shared that for a lot of entrepreneurs that they're working with in Georgia, really looking at less than $10,000 in capital. We see similar things in Colorado here. And also, not everyone has access to $10,000 in their savings account. RMMFI works predominantly with businesses that qualify as minority-owned businesses, so businesses owned by people of color and by women. And we know that these communities have been historically locked out of opportunities for workforce participation, has led to overall more financial instability throughout the past century, and really a major contributor to what we still see today, which is the racial wealth gap and the gender wealth gap. So really talking about the personal foundations of the entrepreneur and how we create stability. So stable jobs is the first key rung on the economic mobility ladder, as well as accounting for some key partnerships in affordable housing and childcare. At RMMFI, we talk a lot about the whole paycheck concept and helping entrepreneurs really build a foundation that could include running their business and having a job and having other sources of personal stability. So having a savings account, having some money in your savings account, you know, certainly is a key rung there. The other piece is access to outside capital. Exclusion from financial institutions, from lending organizations, is well documented historically, but still continues to this day. Even coming out of COVID, there was research to show that businesses owned by people of color and by women got disproportionately less access to COVID relief dollars and COVID loans. So we still see some of these systemic inequities play out today. I will say one of the key ways to level the playing field is by working within the CDFI network. CDFI is Community Development Financial Institution. These are mission-based lending institutions, and I can talk a little bit more about why I see those as one of the key ways to create more opportunities in this space. But ultimately, we're talking about having access to your own income and having access to capital and lending through your business. And then the third thing that I'll point out around this concept of leveling the playing field is both of these inequities have contributed to an overall lack of trust in business support systems and in financial institutions, especially in the communities that RMMFI works in. So really building that trust is key. We operate education and technical assistance and mentorship programs as one of the ways to help build the capacity of the entrepreneur to grow their business over time and really lean into a network of business support. Unfortunately, in COVID, we saw a huge uptick in predatory business services, and there's a real vulnerability to that. So working to build that trust and to build that system. I will say a positive trend I've seen out of COVID is that I'm seeing more technical assistance and more education organizations that are popping up to meet the unique needs, whether it's of specific communities or cultures or locations. And I think that that's a real positive piece to level the playing field there.
Teresa, thank you. And I was, definitely the part about 2.5 is higher for business owners. And then, for Blacks and Hispanics to have a 10 times higher, that's very interesting. And I want to kind of lead into the next question by saying, how can disadvantaged entrepreneurs gain access to capital and technical assistance?
Yeah, thanks for that, Evan. So disadvantaged entrepreneurs is a little bit of a catch-all term to talk about a variety of folks who the system wasn't built for them or for us. So I talk a lot about minority-owned businesses, businesses owned by women and people of color who have historically and systemically been locked out of opportunities. RMMFI works with some other communities that have higher barriers to building and launching their business. A whole line of our business is operated exclusively in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking communities. We also work with entrepreneurs who have histories in the criminal justice system, who have been formerly incarcerated and experience barriers to the workforce, as well as rural communities who have trouble accessing entrepreneurship. Eric alluded to that as well. I see two key partners in this space. And I'll come back to CDFIs. So once again, CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. These are mission-driven financial institutions that support economically disadvantaged communities. And we saw a lot of positive publicity for CDFIs coming out of COVID. CDFIs were better equipped to distribute COVID relief dollars to communities during a really tumultuous time. CDFIs can exist in a lot of different forms. RMMFI is a CDFI, a really small one. Our whole portfolio is less than $1 million, but you can find CDFIs that are operating, hundreds of millions of dollars and working on really large scale regional projects. Affordable housing comes to mind, but there's a real deep connection with the small business community. And some things that I think that CDFIs are really good at and why there's an opportunity here is really building deep community connections, engagement, and outreach, really building trust with the small business community. CDFIs are generally able to have a more expansive definition of who might qualify for a loan. So as I mentioned, our MMFI, we do not look at some of the traditional financial metrics like credit score or collateral. Instead, we offer character-based or relationship-based lending that increases that access for entrepreneurs who may not be able to go to a bank and get the loan that they need to start their business. And CDFIs are generally better able to offer some more flexible capital products. So whether it's lower interest or even no interest loans, coming out of COVID, I'm seeing a really positive trend of CDFIs being able to offer forgivable or partially forgivable loans. These are structured more like grants, as well as a wide variety of lending. RMMFI offers loans as low as $500, and there is a demand for that. Our most popular loans are generally between $2,000 and $5,000, and so really offering a broader spectrum of access to capital. And the second piece is around technical assistance providers. there are not enough of us in this space to meet the need. And specifically, TA providers that are culturally responsive and are designing really supportive and longer term programming. RMMFI offers accelerators from how to ideate your business concept to how to file your business paperwork. We're offering different accelerators specifically for Spanish-speaking entrepreneurs, for food businesses, really recognizing the different barriers and opportunities that exist there. I think long-term mentorship is one thing that has a really big impact in this space. Certainly there are like one-off business advisor meetings that are beneficial for specific business questions or needs, like how do I hire my first employee? But really the benefits around long-term mentorship to really build those connections, build that community, and build those networks is really influential for our disadvantaged entrepreneurs. And then credit. So although RMMFI is an institution that doesn't really use a credit score, most do, and credit is something that a lot of us don't understand or find inaccessible or scary. And if you are a business owner, if you're a sole proprietor, if you're operating your LLC, your personal credit is tied to the business. And so if you have, say, unpaid medical debt that has gone into collections, that does impact your business's ability to get access to capital. And so really helping folks better understand credit and build comfortability with credit over time is something that can be really influential in this space. Evan, I think you're muted.
A rookie move here. Thank you, Teresa. I knew it was going to happen at some point, and so it's okay. I just wanted to follow up with one more question and just ask you, what are a few benefits to becoming an entrepreneur versus what some might consider a more traditional career path?
Yeah, I like this question. I would also argue that entrepreneurship is a traditional career path for a lot of folks. And so when I think about who operates my local corner store, who my neighborhood plumber is, who the artists are that are vending at a lot of the holiday markets that we're seeing this time of year, who are the independent consultants that I hire to support with specific business needs I have. Entrepreneurship is really built into the fabric of our community and has these really positive community effects. You know, Eric alluded to some of these, our small businesses are really well equipped to meet the unique needs of specific communities and cultures and locations, allowing us to buy the products and services we really want and need. And that small businesses, when you shop at a small business, those dollars are more likely to stay local and create local benefits. So we see the ripple effects in entire communities. But bringing it back to the entrepreneur, you know, in addition to the wealth building potential that I shared earlier, and I think Eric alluded to this too, flexibility is a huge benefit of entrepreneurship. When we think about all the caregivers in our society, and we know that caregivers are still predominantly women, that the flexibility of entrepreneurship can allow people to have multiple roles and responsibilities in their lives and still participate in the workforce and build that financial security. I think legacy is something that's really beautiful about entrepreneurship. Really, don't we all want a meaningful connection to our work? So many of our entrepreneurs come to us because they want to build on knowledge and skills that were passed down from their own families, as well as start a business that their kids could take over one day. And then finally, I'll share around reducing barriers for others. So RMMFI works with formerly incarcerated entrepreneurs who have barriers themselves to accessing the workforce and are often starting businesses out of that necessity to create their own job opportunity. And I can't tell you how many times I hear, I created this business so that I can help others who have a similar background as me. And so as these entrepreneurs are creating jobs and building their business, really creating those opportunities for others. And I just think that's something that's really powerful about this space.
Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. And I'm going to go into our next Slido poll. So once again, I'm going to ask everybody if they can just go ahead and take out their phone and scan with the screen with your phone and vote on how has entrepreneurship impacted your area. So go ahead and take out your phone scan the QR code, and then add your answer. Is it more jobs created, larger tech or manufacturing scene, diverse workforce, or maybe your area could benefit more from entrepreneurship? And so if that is the choice, I think that would be really cool as well. And then if something is on here that you don't see that maybe you would like to discuss, go ahead and pop a question into the question pane, and we can discuss that at the end. And while we're getting into that and just kind of letting everybody take the time to scan, I'm just going to move into the section with Latanya. So Latanya, thank you so much for being here again today. And I just wanted to get into the first question while everybody is scanning the QR code and choosing a selection here. And Latanya, describe how WorkSource East Central Georgia assists entrepreneurs, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you see? And Latanya, I think you might be on mute.
I got it.
Yeah, it's, you know, after a couple of years of going virtual, it still happens, you know, so we're all in this together, you know.
Certainly it does. Yes. So, you know, our organization, Assisting Entrepreneurs, is not any different than any other job seeker. It really is not. We are administrated, we owe a grant, and so we work within that framework. So our idea is to provide a talent supply chain to meet the needs of our communities. And of course, an entrepreneur, as you can see in the poll, in everyone's community, that we need more of entrepreneurship. That is what we should be doing as practicing workforce professionals. So, but how do you do this? I mean, we're talking about WIOA, and WIOA does have some metrics. I think Eric mentioned this earlier about the barriers of putting together an appropriate design program for entrepreneurs. And so, but that's what Eric and I did. We worked together, and he's a great listener. Some of the three challenges that I could say that we had that we were thinking of, okay, so, you know, what about this credential? You know, if I'm going to put someone in entrepreneurship training, I need a credential to show for. So what is that credential that an entrepreneur receives? Secondly, what about those wages? You know, I need that person to be employed. How do I show that someone is employed and my median earnings? So I think those are the three top challenges that we have when working with, you know, an entrepreneur training program. So, but the Make Startups program really addressed those for us. It was a great vehicle to get attached to. I can tell you from the standpoint of the credential, as Eric had mentioned, we worked to get this program on our on our state eligible training providing list. They are credentialed through a accrediting agency in Georgia. So that has helped us as well with the credential. But I want to say also, don't just not serve someone with entrepreneurship through a training program. There are career services that you could actually provide someone, short-term services that they may need to learn how to work QuickBooks or any other platform that they would need to operate their business. So not only ITAs that we can serve someone with through entrepreneurship. The next is, and I mentioned QuickBooks, we're talking about wages and showing that someone is working. But by the definition of being an entrepreneur, you are working. There is a business license that is associated with them setting up shop. So having that business license to support documentation that they are certainly, you know, they are in business, that they are working. And then thirdly, as I mentioned with wages, Eric through his program developed a mechanism where we can receive those QuickBooks wages and use that as a supplemental income to show that someone is working. Now, hearing this on a median earnings, if you really have to look at who are you exiting in that quarter, because as everyone knows with work with WIOA, that median earning, you could get a hit. So you do have to pay attention and sort of devise your exits around who you are serving. So, but those have been the challenges, especially as, we were trying to develop and start this program. I would hear from, our career coaches, what documentation am I going to get? So any type of entrepreneur training, look for those credentials, the wages, and the median earnings that you can support.
Thank you, Latanya. And yes, credentials, wages, and median earnings. I would wonder if anybody else out in the audience is also facing these challenges in your area. And if you are, please enter that into the question pane so we can discuss at the end. Leading into my next question, Latanya, describe the impact of new startups on the economy in Georgia or in your area of Georgia during the last year and then over the last 5 years.
Well, I would tell you over the last 9 years, Georgia has been the #1 state to do business in. And
awesome.
We flourished because of entrepreneurship. And of course, Georgia has created a climate where startups can be successful. We have economic incentives, those startup job creations, and a reasonable tax rate. So we have seen a notable increase in startups over the last year. Georgia, I would say we would probably create, statistics say that we create 230,000 jobs, and it has had a $5 billion impact, an economic impact in the state. So the influx of startups is having a positive impact on the Georgia economy. Locally, we need entrepreneurs. I live in a rural community that is majority minority community, and just like Teresa had mentioned, even finding traditional jobs, as you will, those manufacturers, they're not there in the community. There are no manufacturers because we do not have a hospital. So, but we still need services. So this is a way to lift ourselves up from our bootstrap to provide jobs for the community, to help with housing, construction, because there are still things that are happening. I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that is occurring with Georgia economy and others around the nation, of course, is broadband. But I work formerly utilities. I'm an engineer by trade, and I manage a utility company. And most of the time, those workers are not employed by the utility companies. We have contractors. So those contractors are certainly entrepreneurs. And right now, with the infrastructure bills that that is amongst us, and all the other grants that are out there with the Department of Commerce, one of the things that we should do certainly is encourage entrepreneurship to support the infrastructure that we're building out in our state and nation.
Thank you, Latanya. And for staff members at workforce agencies and American Job Centers and folks who are just generally attending today, what would you recommend is the most important thing that you can do to help an entrepreneur or to somebody who is up and coming and wants to get into entrepreneurship?
Well, Evan, I would say that would be similar. Just helping any job seeker that you would help them assess their skills, interests, identifying opportunities, and connecting them with resources. Some of the other things I think that we could help with in our American Job Centers is data. We have a lot of resources and data on our communities. What jobs are available, what gaps are there in the jobs, and that can help guide an entrepreneur in what field they want to go in. I mean, they may not. You may be able to tell someone, and this is not the case, but childcare. Oh, we have so many different childcare facilities. Well, that is definitely not the case now. But if that were, someone may not want to pursue an interest in a daycare center. So I think it is the same that you would do for any other client that's coming in, ensuring their success and investing in that success.
Thank you, Latanya. And for this, I have one more question, but I'd like to actually get get answers from Latanya, from you, Eric, and Teresa, because I think this is probably a question that we can all discuss as a group, and we have discussed it throughout this presentation. But if an entrepreneur is seeking funding, how can an agency staff member assist them with finding assistance? What do you recommend? Like, what are some of the best ways that somebody in this role can do to help an individual?
Well, here at the Workforce Center, please do not use any WIOA funding for any business startup costs. That is, of course, a no-no. However, Eric and Teresa talked about some of these funding streams, and we, again, need to leverage our networks, our partnerships. We have our Small Business Administration, CDFIs, USDA, these other agencies can also help with entrepreneurship. I see that Eric has also joined in, and so you want to add to that, Eric and Teresa?
Well, I think what I would add is that's really the entire design of the Make Startups process, was trying to look at how we address the barriers that you were having around industry credentialing and exiting folks, and how to get people into the capital that Teresa can provide. And so we really, we structured this so that we have 25 different financial institutions that have endorsed this credential. And our goal is that we then, once someone comes in, we do skills assessments. We track them as they grow in their, everything from their marketing, their financial planning, their legal issues, their technology issues related to business. And then we monitor their financial accounting software for 2 years, so that we can see how well they're performing. And we basically are designed to become sort of like a character-based underwriting system for people who might not be able to qualify for capital. And so it's critically important for us to work with partners like Teresa, so that we can see how well are people succeeding. Like our goal is to help people get capital. And so that's why Make Startups exists. But I would really leave it to Teresa, because she's the one that actually does give people capital.
Yeah, I guess my big thing to share is that there is an ecosystem for support out there. I've talked a lot about CDFIs. That is one of several designations, but this broader field of mission-based lending does exist. It is becoming more robust, and it's in every state. And so whether it's a small CDFI in Colorado or ones that exist where all of us live, there are opportunities out there, and I would encourage creating those connections with private sector and nonprofit sectors in this space. CDFIs, among other mission-based lending institutions, are well equipped to help support the variety of needs that people have. So whether it's on the technical assistance side, so maybe even pre-loan, or maybe it's offering those grants or those forgivable loan opportunities, there are a lot that there's a lot in the space to explore.
Yeah, in every community. After you, Latanya.
No, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the things that I've learned, there really is a community. There's an organization in every community that's trying to help entrepreneurs. And so, from the workforce perspective, I would say to do your best to find that organization and see how you can partner together, because we were a struggling little nonprofit in Augusta, Georgia, and it was Latanya's organization that first reached out to us and gave us sort of a lifeline of figuring out how we could begin to build the support around what we do. And through that, we've been able to, like I said, help create 1,500 jobs, support 350 businesses. And now we're able to start supporting people in other communities and make startups. Like, we don't go into a community and try to run a program. We try to go into a community as your partner with your local organization so that they can run a program, so that they can succeed. Because ultimately they understand the challenges that entrepreneurs in your community are facing much better than any organization from outside of your community ever will.
Thank you all.
I also wanted to add.
Go ahead, Latanya.
Oh, that's okay. I know we're focused on the startup of an entrepreneur, but we as workforce professionals, we also have that ability to support the entrepreneur throughout their career cycle, so to speak. You know, our business services programs with on-the-job training, incumbent worker training, small businesses need those supports as well. So as we are working, please build those into your program design to work with small businesses and those resources, as well as add them, make sure that they have a table at the local workforce board. That is really important so they can have a voice in the things that we are doing. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you all. And I wanted to go ahead and just jump into some of the questions that have been added throughout this presentation. And we do have quite a few. So question, and this I guess would be maybe for Eric or Latanya, but with the Startup Act, will that be incorporated with WIOA, and is that program in the state of Florida?
So the Startup Act would amend WIOA to do these different provisions. There's not, I'm unaware of a program currently approved in the state of Florida, but I would say that we've discovered the reciprocity process isn't necessarily that challenging at the state level. The real key is there someone at a local level that is willing to sort of take the, I hesitate to use the word risk, so I don't want to dissuade anybody from doing it, but to have the courage to be the first to fund in your state and make sure that that you're willing to provide those entrepreneurs with the support, because you can't get a program really off the ground by just doing one or two entrepreneurs. The nature of doing any sort of technical assistance program, any sort of training program, is that the organization that's doing the work needs to probably support 10 to 15 entrepreneurs at a time so that it's financially viable for them to do the work. And so you need to be able to look at it and say, okay, the need is that great in my community and I'm willing to do that effort. So hopefully that answered your question about the Startup Act piece of it, but ultimately, yes, it would amend WIOA.
Thank you. And Beatrice asks, are there any restrictions for individuals with barriers such as justice-involved backgrounds or with substance use? With specifically, I would take it to with entrepreneurship.
No, that is actually ideal for those with barriers, disabilities, and of course, justice involved. Oftentimes an employer say, oh, you have a record, we're not able to hire you. However, that person still has value and still has talent. Entrepreneurship allows this person to be in the workforce. And I know we're speaking of small business, you can actually contract work is that gig work that we were talking about in the beginning. That is certainly an avenue as well to support. There are so many that come to us, and unfortunately life happens. We have a situation where a young lady was certainly at the top of her game working for a local elected official. Then unfortunately she had, she and her mother had some health emergencies, and she no longer could work that schedule that was required of her. But does not mean that she could not work at all. She actually was long-term unemployed, affected during COVID, I believe, is when she actually started her business. So it's a perfect opportunity to, get back into the workforce when you're having barriers or even start a new business. And I think, Teresa, maybe you wanted to add?
Thank you. So I have a question from Stacy. If WIOA requires program participants to seek employment, not to start a business, how would the Startup Act fit in?
So basically it treats working your own business as a job, and so that's the key distinction. It's if you going back to looking at entrepreneurship rates and whether this is traditional employment or not across America, a third of a percent of the entire population starts a business every year. So I would say that qualifies as one of our highest demand industries that's out there. There's probably not a lot of fields that you look at where you have that percentage of the population going into it. And so the Startup Act starts to normalize that so that's viewed as a traditional employment pathway.
Thank you. And a question from Nuri. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Teresa, do you provide assistance for other states besides Colorado and Georgia?
So Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute only works in Colorado right now. However, there's a couple of key resources I could direct you to in addition to the work that Eric's doing with Make Startups. A couple of things. So check out the CDFI fund. So this CDFI is actually a designation through the US Treasury. And so you can find lists of CDFIs in your state. Some other places I would follow would be Opportunity Finance Network, OFN, and Association for Enterprise Opportunity, AEO. Those are big national organizations that are doing a lot of policy and advocacy work and could be a good network to get connected with to find out who's a mission-based lender and who's offering technical assistance in your state.
Thank you, Teresa. And then I have a few questions also from Venus. Venus asks, can you elaborate on, well, actually, you kind of already did that, but Venus wanted you to elaborate on services outside of CDFIs. So I think that was just kind of covered there. If there are any other organizations or services that you recommend outside of what you just listed, I think that would pretty much solidify that question. Eric, how does an organization partner with you to be an entrepreneurship workforce partner similar to East Central Georgia?
It's really straightforward. The main thing that we're looking for is that an organization has the appropriate partner network in its community to succeed. So first off, do they have support from their local workforce board? That's a critical one. Then second, do they have at least 3 financial institutions in their community that would be willing to sign a letter of support to basically endorse this process? Because ultimately, again, we don't come in and provide capital. We're providing a framework so that their local capital providers can support their startups. So if they can provide those things, then we can work with them. And there's a form on our website that they can fill out to add their city and schedule a meeting, and we'll talk with them.
Thank you, Eric. And it's 1:59, so I want to be cognizant and respectful of people's times. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for meeting with me and getting together to connect and put together this presentation. With any pathways that I do, I always learn a lot myself, and so there is definitely no difference with this one. So thank you, LaTanya, Eric, Teresa. I sincerely appreciate it. And to the audience, again, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you all. Be excellent to each other and have a great day. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everyone.
the opportunity.